Hello, my name is Spencer, and in my podcast called The Dictionary, I literally read from the dictionary, but add in my personal comments and stupid jokes to make it more interesting. Episodes are family-friendly, short, and air every single day on basically every podcast platform. Come join me on this journey filled with edutainment.
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you've never seen, the scripts that were never written, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
My name is Daniel Kaka.
And my name is Micah Hirsch.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. Micah, this has been a movie that has been on our list for quite a while, and I believe you specifically requested it as well. You were one of many, but we brought you on specifically because you actually have your own podcast. Can you talk about that for a bit?
I have a podcast called The Emperor's New Podcast. It's about everything related to The Emperor's New Groove, the entire universe. So I talk about the movies, the TV show, even talked about the video game.
I want to know what started this Emperor's New Groove fascination. I'll say for myself, I remember seeing the movie and enjoying the movie, but I never really got into the expanded lore of it all.
When the movie came out, I liked it okay. As a kid, I was like 6. I remember liking the sequel okay, and I remember liking the show okay, but a couple years after the show ended, they would play reruns at like 5:30 in the morning. And I would wake up and just watch those reruns, and that made me interested in revisiting the movie, and then I wanted the world to know about this expanded Emperor's New Groove universe, and what works and what doesn't about everything. So that's how I came up with the podcast, and also maybe it's a good calling card for people who want to know about my interests.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know if we want to talk before we get into the story of what we're doing, what our experience or opinion of the original movie is.
I probably saw it in like 2001,
Mm-hmm.
and I was maybe 11 years old at that time. So middle school, I was at a very impressionable age. And I just remember really loving this movie as it's hilarious. It's a really funny movie. And like middle schoolers do, anything that is really funny is then quotable. So this was quoted to the nines. It was basically the Napoleon Dynamite of its day. Everyone was quoting it in my school. I know for sure that I did not see the movie in theaters. And after doing the research, I kind of realized why I never saw it in theaters, because I don't think I knew it was in theaters. For some reason, I thought it was like a straight to DVD, like a straight to video movie, because like that's when it became popular, was when it actually was on DVD or VHS. I think we had a DVD player at the time, but I did not own it. Then David, what was your experience with?
I don't remember where I would have seen it. It must have been attached as a trailer to a different movie that I saw a bunch, but I remember watching the trailer over and over again. The one with the sharp rocks at the bottom. I feel like I saw that 100 times before I saw the movie. I don't remember if I would have seen it in theaters, but I know we definitely owned it.
I did see it in theaters last year.
Hey, that counts. Wait, how did you see it in theaters last year?
There was a re-release at 700-something theaters in January of last year.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Was it like the original Prince, or did they like enhance it somehow?
I don't think they enhanced it at all. I think it was the same. There were bars on the side of the screen, so...
I feel like I must have owned it as well, because I feel like I watched it a whole bunch. It's a movie that I remember watching a ton as a kid, and I actually had the experience of watching it again as an adult when it came to Disney Plus, and I didn't end up being able to finish it. I don't know why. It just didn't work for me again as an adult. Maybe I just was in the wrong state of mind when I was watching it, but...
Wait, how long is the movie? It's like just under 90 or something?
It's like 72 minutes and then 6 minutes of credits. It's very short.
Yes.
And Disney Plus says it's longer than it is. They say it's an hour and 20 minutes, but it's not.
In my rewatch, that surprised me, like how soon it ended. I thought it was longer than it was, but even with it, it's so dense with jokes and so many great moments in it that I think that's why I think it's longer than it really is, because like so much happens in such a little amount of time. It's like when I remember back to watching Arrested Development, I keep trying to remember like when they burnt down the banana stand. And I keep thinking like it's near the end of season 1. And I rewatched it
like
to realize
episode.
it's the second episode. I was like, oh, this happened really fast, really quick. And Emperor's New Groove is like the same way. It's the same pace where it's just so quick and so much happens in such a little amount of time.
It was also just like such a weird movie for Disney to make. It feels more like a DreamWorks movie of the time than it does a Disney movie of the time.
Or a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird remembering that that's a Disney movie. I feel like that would have been my first exposure. Oh, wait, no. Probably would have been Sully would have been my first exposure to the incredible talent of John Goodman. But certainly was my first exposure to, probably was everybody's first exposure to.
Oh, really? I wonder where that could be.
Patrick Warburton.
The Soren man himself.
Nice work, pal.
Captain Soren.
The reason that Patrick Warburton is in that ride is because the people who were making the Soren pre-show loved his performance in The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh, that's awesome.
Initially wanted to get John Travolta to be in the pre-show, but there were scheduling conflicts, so they chose Patrick Warburton because they enjoyed his performance.
That is definitely a trade-up.
I'm surprised that they didn't try to hire Rob Riggle, because he is an actual pilot for the military. That would have been a nice tie-in there, but...
Or they should have had Harrison Ford do it.
Oh my God.
All right, listen up, everybody.
That's how it crashes.
Yeah, if you get the Harrison Ford intro video, you know you're in trouble.
You get out now and you run.
There's nothing that sounds more like soaring over California than Harrison Ford flying your plane straight into a golf course. It's okay to joke about Harrison Ford being bad at flying, right?
I mean, he didn't die in
Yeah, everybody was fine.
Even Conan made a joke about it with Harrison Ford on as a guest, where he asked him, like, if you're spiraling down to the ground, like, what do you do? And Harrison Ford, without flinching, looked at Conan and was like, shit and die.
That sounds like Harrison Ford.
I thought he was going to say, what do you mean if? Should we start going into what the story is? We're all talking about this movie that actually got made, but what's the real story?
So, The Lion King hits theaters June 15th, 1994, and it made a huge roar.
My mommy went to see that at the theater while she was pregnant with me.
I believe I actually did see The Lion King in theaters. I remember it being such a big deal because it was one of the first animated movies to incorporate computer animation.
I think the first was Great Mouse Detective.
In that era where they slowly started to use computers more and more, because you've got like the dance scene in Beauty and the Beast, and then the Wildebeest chase in Lion King.
For The Lion King, its worldwide box office total grossed nearly $970 million, making it, at the time, the highest grossing animated film. And that record would then be beaten in 2010 with Toy Story 3.
Wow.
Currently, the highest animated film is actually The Lion King, although it's the 2019 Lion King.
Oh, boo.
I was
that's
shocked
a
that it
shame.
actually grossed higher.
They kept marketing it as not being animated, but they went ahead and were like, okay, we're animated, sure.
The 1994 Lion King, it was co-directed by Rob Minkoff and Roger Allers. In the initial stages of King of the Jungle, later changed to The Lion King, the film was directed by George Schneider, who prior to made his directorial debut with Oliver and Company. Roger Allers later joined the production to make his directorial debut as the co-director of The Lion King. Allers helped develop the story for Oliver and Company just before joining The Lion King and was the head of story for Beauty and the Beast. The two of them clashed over the tone of the film. Schneider wanted the film to feel more like a nature documentary, while Allers wanted a musical. After much disagreement, Schneider left the film, and to fill in was Rob Minkoff, who also worked on Oliver and Company, but in a minor role creating music and lyrics for the song Good Company, and he helped develop the script for Beauty and the Beast. So they were well acquainted. For Minkoff, this was the first time directing an animated feature, but prior to actually directed two Roger Rabbit shorts, Tummy Trouble and Roller Coaster Rabbit. Whatever they did together was lightning in a bottle, and they did it incredibly well. For Roger Allers, he was hot shit. And Disney, more specifically, Vice President of Disney Animation Studios at the time, Thomas Schumacher, was looking to capitalize on this by offering him another animated film to direct. In the meeting, Schumacher proposed a film that would explore the ancient South American cultures, and Allers came back with wanting to make a story about the Incas set in the mountains of Machu Picchu. Allers also drew inspiration from the Anthony Hope novel, The Prisoner in Zenda, in which the king of Ruritania is drugged the day before of his coronation, preventing him from taking the crown. Fortunately, a visitor that resembles the king is persuaded to go through the ceremony in his place so that the incapacitated king could resume his rule. In 1994, the untitled Roger Allers Inca animated feature started development.
I didn't realize it was that early, 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Disney had a lot of, especially at the start of this renaissance, was like, okay, we're going to take a lot of these fairy tales, Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid. Then partway through the 90s is when they said, oh, let's also do stories that aren't Eurocentric. Let's do Pocahontas. Let's do Mulan. Was this being developed around the same time as Pocahontas, Mulan, or was this like one of the first stories they were developing that was...
Mulan was later down the line, but it definitely would have been around the time of Pocahontas.
Okay.
So yeah, they're starting to develop the story, or Roger Allers is starting to develop the story, and with the help of writer Matthew Jacobs, who wrote the Doctor Who movie, which we actually talked about in a previous episode. He also wrote a few episodes of The Young Adventures of Indiana Jones. But they helped develop this story, which was titled Kingdom of the Sun. Mm-hmm. When Allers pitched the film to the then CEO Michael Eisner, he said, quote, "It has all the elements of a classic Disney film." With the success of The Lion King, Eisner gave Allers complete freedom when it came to the storyline and the casting. As part of the crew's research, they actually traveled to Machu Picchu in Peru to inspire the look of the film. To repeat the same success Allers had with The Lion King with Elton John, Disney hired Sting to write and perform a majority of the songs for the film.
You may remember Sting from B-Movie.
Yeah. Or from Dune.
Yeah, this is our second Sting appearance this season.
Yes, this is going to be a Sting Central season.
Right after our season of all Guillermo del Toro projects, we're going to do one of all Sting projects. Also, Sting was accused of murdering a guy by Steve Martin that one time.
A what?
Nobody else has seen Only Murders in the Building?
Oh, no.
It's good. It has Sting in it, playing Sting.
Just like B-Movie.
Yeah. See, this is how you cast Sting. You don't cast him to play other parts. You cast Sting to play Sting. Because that's the only character that Sting knows how to play, is Sting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to go through now is basically a synopsis of the movie, or at least the ones that I could find, and like kind of put them all together. We start off with the exposition. Long ago, the shadow god Supai ruled the earth. I don't know how to pronounce a lot of these, so I'm going to be stumbling through a lot of these names. The Viracocha created the sun god Inti to imprison Supa deep in the earth. Inti creates the Incans, who then build a city in order to keep Supai from escaping. The city became known as the Kingdom of the Sun.
Ah, they said it.
So now to the actual plot of the movie. There's Pacha. This one is actually voiced by Owen Wilson. He's tending his flock of llamas as the song Walk the Llama Llama is playing in the background, or as like a sing-along song. Walk the Llama Llama, it is performed by Rascal Flatts and is actually on the soundtrack.
What?
Yeah. Pacha and the llamas notice a procession making their way through a secret passageway into the sacred city, and Snowball, who is Pacha's favorite llama, has joined them somehow. Pacha runs after Snowball, but is stopped by the guards. Yzma, who is voiced by Eartha Kitt, who is the High Priestess, informs Manco Capac, who's then voiced by David Spade, the soon-to-be Emperor, that he needs to choose a llama to be sacrificed for the ceremony. He scans the crowd and spots Snowball as the llama to sacrifice. Yzma also reminds Manco that he needs a bride. She then sneaks to her underground catacombs, where it is revealed that she is reviving the Incan god of darkness, Supa, in exchange to restore her beauty. The final act to complete the spell is to kill Manco because he has the mark of the sun. This is explained while she sings the song Snuff Out the Light, which was actually performed by Eartha Kitt herself, which I believe is also on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by the soundtrack of Emperor's New Groove. As Manco is choosing his bride-to-be, which ends up being Nina, who is voiced by Carlo Gugino, Pacha sneaks into the palace to find Snowball. Before they can escape, they hear footsteps from Yzma and Uwaka.
Huaca. The reason they removed this character was the story. It was because it reminded them of something from Disney's past history they didn't want.
Wait, can you speak more specifically about that?
The HUAC, the House of Un-American Activities, it was a joke.
So Uwaka was voiced by Harvey Feinstein. The deep, gravelly voice.
Harvey Feinstein.
I remember him from Independence Day.
Okay.
He was also in Mulan.
Yes, he was. So after hearing the footsteps, this forces Pacha and Snowball to hide. Yzma and Uwaka lock away Manco in the same room that Pacha is hiding in. Pacha and Manco see each other and discover that they look very similar to each other. Manco, knowing that he's in danger, convinces Pacha to trade places, and in return, Pacha would return Snowball.
We're twins.
Impossible.
No, then I bet we're distant cousins because we look exactly alike.
As Yzma is completing the potions, she spots Manco, disguised as Pacha, escaping. She immediately leaves to catch him. They both go to a tavern where Yzma attempts to poison him, only to accidentally give him the llama potion instead. She tries to kill him again, but Manco escapes into a llama pen with Snowball. Manco has a distinct birthmark, the mark of the sun, on his body, which is still there, even in llama form, which helps the audience know who Manco is.
The reputation I've always heard for this, my impression was always that this was more typical Disney Renaissance fare, where it was not as much of a farce as Emperor's New Groove. But this whole llama transformation thing, I don't know, maybe it's just because that idea is so ridiculous to me because of Emperor's New Groove that it feels a little silly, a little sillier at least than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the common denominator seems to be like, he turns into a llama no matter what. That has to stay as the through line.
We gotta have a llama transformation in this picture.
We gotta have David Spade as a llama.
That was the pitch of the movie initially, was David Spade is a llama. And they're like, whatever, man, you made Lion King. Pacha is discovered by Uwaka and discovers quickly that he is not Manco. Pacha pleads with Uwaka and offers in exchange for his life that he will go through with the ceremony and he would give Uwaka 100 llamas. Yzma continues to search for Manco but with no luck and is forced to return when she hears the coronation horns. Pacha, as Manco, is paraded through the town with his bride Nina. Pacha immediately falls for her while Nina is not happy. Manco spots the procession and is furious, and in retaliation he releases the llamas into the crowd. The villagers panic, but Pacha hops down and begins playing the pan flute to lure the llamas back into their pen, including Manco. The song Walk the Llama Llama is reprised while the action is going on. Uwako is angry with Pacha's actions and sends him back to the chambers. Uwako is now searching the city for Manco. Meanwhile, Pacha is forced to attend the coronation banquet, but he sneaks out to get to his llamas. Yzma follows Pacha, attempts to kill him, but stops when she spots Manco. She then attempts to sacrifice Manco for the Empire, but Pacha pushes for a new law that there will be no more llama sacrifices, which impresses Nina. The llamas chase Yzma away. She returns to the god Supai, who gives her one last chance. During the love ballad, One Day She'll Love Me, which was performed by Sting, Pacha and Nina visit the Viracocha stone and confess their love for each other. All while Manco overhears the exchange, feels bad about himself, and then he wanders away. Uwaka is still looking for Manco, and I guess didn't consult with Yzma, but somehow Yzma manages to capture Manco. Pacha is about to tell Nina the truth, but is interrupted when he hears the sacrificial horns and knows that Manco is about to be sacrificed. Pacha stops the sacrifice just in time, but Yzma reveals that he is not Manco by ripping off his sleeve, showing the crowd that he does not bear the mark of the sun. Uwaka arrives to claim the switch was his plan all along, but Yzma isn't having it. Pacha is taken away. Meanwhile, Uwaka discovers the mark of the sun on the llama. Uwaka teams up with Snowball and attempts to rescue Manco just before the eclipse, but it's too late. Yzma kills Manko. The spell is complete. The song Snuff Out the Light is played again as Yzma becomes younger. Supai emerges from the ground to take over the world. Uwaku prays to Viracocha, which transports him and Pacha to the Viracocha stone, which then turns into a real rope. This part confused me. The way that the synopsis says this, I can't really visualize it, and maybe there was something else about it, but it says, with the rope, Pacha and the villagers then lasso the sun god Inti to fight off Supai. So wait, they prayed to Viracocha. Viracocha heard their plea. They were transported to Viracocha, and they're like, all right, so instead of me doing the summoning, I'm going to give you guys this rope. Or like he turns into a rope.
I think it's a sacred like landmark, and they use the rope to lasso the sun because mythology.
Okay. I guess this is showing my gap in knowledge of Incan culture. So I didn't fully understand that, but I guess that's how it goes. Anyway, so after Supai is destroyed, Yzma is reduced to dust. So I guess she dies. Manko is then revived, so he comes back to life, and he comes back in human form. Manko offers his crown to Pacha, who refuses and continues his happy life as a llama herder. Pacha and Nina marry each other and leave the city with a flock of llamas to the tune of Walk the Llama Llama. Now, there's a few alterations that they made to the script, and I didn't really know where to fit them in, so I just kind of put them all at the end here. There was a love interest for Manko, and it was supposed to be another llama herder. Her name was going to be Mata, who was going to be voiced by Laura Prepon. You might remember her from That 70s Show and Orange is the New Black. But she was actually going to help Manko plot against Yzma and exact their revenge. And then Uwaka would have been more of a sidekick to Yzma rather than serving Pacha or Cusco, which then down the line became the duty for Crunk. Now, Uwaka was actually given his own musical number, which was titled Why Can't a Human Be More Like a Rock?, which was going to be performed by Sting, which was kind of a parody of Why Can't a Woman Be More Like a Man? I didn't actually describe what Uwaka looks like. Actually, Micah, can you describe what Uwaka looks like? Because it's a very strange character.
He's in like an amulet that's like a little rock dude with a crown, the Inca crown type design on a rock, basically. Like a tumi, which is a sacrificial axe. He sort of looks like that, but he's an amulet that Yzma could wear around her neck. And he's made of rock, and he's like thousands of years old or something.
Yeah, he is not human. That was another thing I probably should have brought up.
I mean, it does definitely feel more typical, Renaissance Disney fare, and it's very much, the Prince and the Pauper storyline. I think like any of the Disney movies of this era, it probably would depend a whole lot more on the execution. It's difficult to just kind of hear the story and be like, oh, this would be good or bad. Knowing Disney at the time, the execution probably would have been pretty on point and probably would have turned out to be pretty good. I feel like I am still a little unsure about how goofy or silly it is, and I'm sure we'll get into that because like the plotting seems like it could be basically any sort of typical Disney Renaissance thing, but the casting feels a lot sillier than something like Pocahontas. So it does seem like they are going for that more comedic bent. It seems like going full farce was the right direction if you've already got people like David Spade in your movie.
I mean, you have voices that are very distinct from each other. Like even Owen Wilson, who is supposed to be like the everyman person, is still a very distinct voice. And then you are filling that with other voices that are like Harvey Fierstein for sure is one of those voices where like once you hear it,
100%. When was this cast? Because if this was pitched in 94, Bottle Rocket, which was Owen Wilson's first movie, didn't come out until 96. And even then, like I'm looking at his early career and he's got like Bottle Rocket and Armageddon, and like that's it until you get into the 2000s when he starts to do more stuff with like Meet the Parents and Zoolander and stuff like that he actually like starts to become the Owen Wilson that we know and love. It's interesting, that casting, because that feels like they were casting Owen Wilson before he was nearly as big of a name as he is now.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
Normally, in these kinds of movies, the main character isn't a big name. Most of the big names are like the side characters. It fits with the era to have someone who, at the time, was not a big known name.
It makes me think of a different world where Owen Wilson pursued more voice work and became a voice actor first and foremost. Now that I think about it, he's done, a couple of voice stuff. Say what you will about Cars, but I think he does a good job in that movie at like playing that character. It makes me wonder about the alternate universe where like Owen Wilson just became a accomplished voice actor instead.
That would be a different variant of Owen Wilson.
I'm trying to look into if he did any other voices. After this, the only time that he did any voice acting was for Heat, Vision, and Jack.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Heat, Vision, and Jack, he's just a voice in that.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. He wasn't even established. Wow.
One thing that you didn't bring up, some versions of the story had, Yzma also had 3 mummies as her sidekicks.
Oh.
I didn't know mummies were a thing in Incan culture.
There are mummies in Peru, yeah.
Okay.
Huh. I did not know that. The film was initially titled Kingdom of the Sun, but it was then later renamed to Kingdom in the Sun. The story was constantly being revised after much criticism from the upper management at Disney. What? Upper management at Disney never criticizes anything. They tried to make the story as original as possible while still making it recognizable as a retelling of Prince and the Pauper, but that was their downfall. Disney execs didn't want Prince and the Pauper because Disney had released the animated feature The Prince and the Pauper with Mickey Mouse in 1990.
I'll take your place with your friends in the streets of London, and you shall be the prince. The prince? I can't be the prince. Well, how do I act? What do I say? You needn't worry, lad. To govern, you need to say only one of 2 things. That's a splendid idea. I'm glad I thought of it. And guards, seize him!
In 1997, producer Randy Fulmer hired Mark Dindal to co-direct and hopefully fix the film. Dindal was a longtime animator for Disney, working on such films as The Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, The Great Mouse Detective, The Brave Little Toaster, Oliver and Company, The Rescuers Down Under, Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, and of course, The Prince and the Pauper. Dindal just finished directing his first animated feature over at Warner Brothers, Cats Don't Dance, before making the move back to Disney. CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, and other execs weren't happy with the story. The story tested poorly with audiences, and the production pace was slowing down. They were hesitant to fire Allers because of his success with The Lion King, and some of the production troubles they had, which was then forgiven with the box office returns. Also, the crew and animators had complete faith in Allers for making a film that might be just as great as The Lion King. There was a lot of push and pull between Allers and Dindal, with Allers wanting scenes to be more dramatic while Dindal was making the film more comedic. It doesn't seem like Dindal was really there to help or co-direct with Allers, but instead to try and punch up the film. It also didn't help that the producers, Schumacher and Schneider, split the staff into 2 different teams. One was under Allers, the other under Dindal, and basically had them compete against each other to make 2 different versions of the movie to see which one was better.
I wasn't sure about Roger Allers' other work, so I just Googled him real quick. It's really basically Lion King, and then his next feature film that he directed was Open Season. Yeah, he's got nothing on his IMDb, which is really interesting to think about how, like, people like Ron and John, who have directed a ton of Disney classics, and it's interesting that the person who directed their best box office performance ever never did anything else. That's wild.
That's almost like the Oscar curse. Like, if you win Best Actor, then you're pretty much out of a job after that. Yeah, that is strange. Although if this movie had been successful, like, they probably would have gone on for like bigger things with Disney.
Yeah.
So by summer of 1998, it was realized that the film would not be ready for its release in summer of 2000. According to producer Randy Fulmer, Disney executives stormed into his office and angrily said, quote, "Your film is this close to being shut down." And it was accompanied by a hand gesture in which the index and the thumb were very close together without touching. Fulmer had to give the threatening news to Allers. The film was attached to promotional deals with McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and other companies, and if the film wasn't released on time, they would lose them. With the added pressure put on Allers, along with him not being able to create his original story, he stepped down on September 23rd, 1998, allowing Mark Dichtel to create his comedic animated feature. Kingdom in the Sun had already cost Disney $25 to $30 million, and the film was about 25% finished before it was scrapped. This made Eisner furious and gave Fulmer 2 weeks to prove that this film could be finished or the production would be shut down for good. Fulmer and Dindal stalled production for 6 months so that they could rework the story. For the animators, they were reassigned to work on the Rhapsody in Blue segment in Fantasia 2000.
One of the best segments of that movie.
Yeah. Before the production could move on, 6 different story pitches were put out there, and the story that went forward came from the storyboard artist Chris Williams. And with the help of David Reynolds, they did a page 1 rewrite on the film and renamed the film The Emperor's New Groove. Micah, this is something I really couldn't find in my research, and maybe you have an answer for this. Do you know what the other pitches were?
I know that one of them was set somewhere in the United States and had sheep. Other than that, I don't know. Because they talked about it on the Sweatbox. They mentioned one of them, instead of llamas, it was sheep.
There was like a lot of speculation that came from the animators where they're like, I think it's going to take place in Kansas, which is why I didn't put that into my notes, because like a lot of it was speculation, but none of it was concrete evidence. When Sting had heard the name, he actually scoffed at it. This is actually in the documentary.
What's the title?
The Emperor's New Groove.
Well, actually, somebody, I knew what it was. Somebody told me the other day, and I didn't like it, but actually seeing it in context...
The Emperor's New Groove, or The Emperor's Got a New Groove.
I kind of like
New
it.
Groove.
That's a James Brown song.
He might actually be referring to the song Ain't That a Groove? David Spade and Eartha Kitt's character stayed, but with a few changes. Yzma was changed to be more like a mad scientist. Manko was changed to Kuzco because someone had discovered that Manko in Japanese is slang for cunt.
Oh!
Yeah, why did they change Manko?
I think it means pussy in Japanese, and that's not what bothered them. It means bad movie in Turkish, and they didn't want that.
So the character was then aged up from a teenager to a middle-aged person and needed an older character to match. Thus, Pacha was then changed to be voiced by John Goodman. The story was going to be a buddy movie with Pacha, a farmer and family man who teams up with Kuzco. Yzma is given an assistant, Kronk, after they drop the character Uwaka. Although he does have a small cameo as the candle holder during the poisoning dinner scene. According to Williams, Kronk was inspired by actor Rick Rossovich, who played Slider in Top Gun, and cast Patrick Warburton based on his character Putty in Seinfeld.
Well, let's see. I've got a 10 kroner, a 5 kroner, a 20 kroner. No, wait. That's another 10 kroner. Empty kroner. How much is that?
So the film and the story was in a constant state of revisions. The original new ending is when Kuzco gets a pool and a water slide in a neighboring hill where he would invite Pacha and his family to use. The scene was changed because of a formal letter that Sting had sent to the filmmaker saying that he would resign unless the scene was changed, stating that as a defender of indigenous people, this goes against his belief to remove people from their homes to build what is essentially a theme park.
Yeah. That is so weird to be like, you're right, I'm a better person. I'm not going to destroy your house. I'm going to go destroy some other poor schmuck's house.
Yeah. And he did make it a point to call it a theme park and for Disney to look at this and be like, shit. He did point out that if the character truly changed, he would not need a water park to be happy. The scene then changed to Kuzco having a Mata shack right next to Pacho, and instead of the water slide, they actually like jump into the pond, river, waterfall thing. Eisner was worried that the tone of the film was too similar to Hercules, which was released in 1997, which didn't perform as expected in the box office when it was released. Disney was also worried about the state of the animation department because the other two serious movies that they made were Pocahontas, which was in 1995, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Both of those underperformed, or at least they didn't perform as well as they expected it to in the box office. Like, it still made money. I looked at it and was like, budget's $50 million, they made like $100 million. I was like, well, it's technically successful, but not astronomical.
It's not Lion King.
No, it isn't. Fulmer and Dindal assured him that this was going to be different, the cast would be smaller, and the film was going to be made on time. Most of the crew returned to the production with the exception of the character designer, Andreas Deja, who went to Florida to work on Lilo and Stitch instead. All 8 songs that Sting wrote with the help of David Hartley were no longer related to the story and had to be dropped from the film. Sting was bitter about the change, stating, quote, "At first, I was angry and perturbed. Then I wanted some vengeance."
And that's why he murdered somebody in that TV show.
That's true. Like I mentioned before, his songs can be found on the Emperor's New Groove soundtrack album. Something that I thought was interesting, I know we've mentioned this documentary before. So when Sting initially signed on to the movie, he agreed under the condition that his wife, Trudy Styler, could document the process and put together a behind-the-scenes documentary. The documentary was released under Zingu Films, which is Sting and Trudy's production company, and they called that the Sweatbox, which shows the troubles behind the making of Kingdom of the Sun. Mostly was the frustrations of Sting that he went through while trying to write themed songs for a script that was constantly being changed and wasn't complete at all.
I have not seen that documentary. Mike, I know you said you saw the documentary. It definitely sounds like it's got to be entertaining to watch.
It's great. When I first saw that, I did not know that it was Sting's wife who actually was behind the camera and like doing the documenting, because so much of the documentary is just following Sting. You basically could just retitle it to The Misery of Sting.
And Sting says fuck a lot.
Yeah, he does. It's so weird because it feels like a Disney behind the scenes featurette. Like whenever you're watching behind the scenes of anything, where you have the animators, you have the directors, the writers who are there to talk up the movie and be like, it's about this and this. They even have like a few actor interviews as well. And they even talk to David Spade where he's talking about his characters, and it feels like a real interview that Disney would put out there. And then it gets to the point where they're like, oh yeah, and then they had to change Micah because I guess it's Japanese for pussy. And I was like, wait a minute, this is not at all a Disney behind the scenes. You mentioned Sting before, like saying fuck a lot. And I was like, this seems really weird. It's like when you see Mr. Rogers put up his middle fingers during filming and behind the scenes, and you're like, that's not Mr. Rogers. Like, this is what it feels like.
Makes me think about as well, like, how fortuitous it is that we had this agreement to film a behind-the-scenes documentary on this project that failed and got changed so much. Or every single project was like this, and this has happened 100 times, and we just know about this one more than anything else because Sting got agreed to...
Pretty much every project at Disney goes through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
I imagine after this, though, Disney was like, no one else is doing behind the scenes but us.
Yeah.
We are in charge of that from now on.
For sure.
Because it really puts them in a terrible light. After Sting's initial run with creating 8 original songs for the film, he actually moved on. He started creating his new album. He was going to go on tour. And while writing his new songs and while going on tour, he actually had to go back to write 2 more songs, which was Perfect World, which was performed by Tom Jones. And that's the initial song that you hear. And then there's the end credits song, which is My Funny Friend and Me. Before doing the research, I had heard about Kingdom of the Sun and that Sting was more involved with that one. And I thought that the end credits song was a song left over from what he initially did, because the tone of that song, if you remember, is very different from the movie. It's like very slow, somber, and like
it's a pop credits Disney song for the Oscar nomination.
Yeah. I did not know that he actually wrote it to specifically be the end credits song or like be part of the movie.
I think he took the movie a bit more seriously than the people making it.
He took it very seriously. Let's be fair. Yeah. If he had the influence to change the ending because he knew the story was bad, he took it very seriously.
I mean, that kind of makes sense that he would want to take it seriously because, like, especially if you're looking at Renaissance era Disney, like, oh, you know, Elton John's getting some songs, Phil Collins getting some music. I want to get in on this. Billy Joel's got a Disney movie. I want to get in on this too. And I want my songs to be just as beloved as Elton John's Lion King songs. So it's like, I can definitely see how that could be part of it as well, of like, oh, this is a really, you know, legit deal that these contemporaries of his are making really beloved songs and he wants to be a part of that.
Yeah. Which I guess the opening song kind of is there, although it's not him singing it. It's Tom Jones. I don't know.
They wanted Sting to sing it. Sting said, no, I'm too old. Get someone young and hip. So they got Tom Jones, who's 10 years older than him.
That is really funny that they're like, yeah, get someone younger. And they did the exact opposite. And he's like, is no one at Disney listening to me at all? You know what? I'll resign if they don't change the ending. I'm just going to fuck with them. Even with Sting's music being cut out and changed, that wasn't the only music that was being changed. So there were two composers for this movie. The original one was Mark Scheinman, and they tested his music with an audience, and a lot of the audience members, like, their feedback was like, it is just way too over the top. The music is really distracting. He got fired, and they had John Debney come in and take over and do the score instead.
He pretended to cry, but he wasn't actually upset.
Oh, yes. I remember that part in the documentary where he's like, I kind of knew it was going to happen, but I'm messing with you. The Emperor's New Groove was released in the year 2000, but December of 2000. The reason for the delayed release wasn't because the production had actually fallen behind, but it was actually because of a DreamWorks movie that came out in March of the same year, The Road to El Dorado. To release a film in the summer of 2000, Disney rushed the production of the mixed live animated film Dinosaur. So here's the speculation. Just before Jeffrey Katzenberg left Disney in 1994, remember, that is when the pitch happened, he caught a glimpse of Kingdom of the Sun in its early stages and then attempted to make a film similar to that.
Because that's the thing that Jeffrey Katzenberg does.
Yep. He tries to release it before Disney to make it look like Disney is trying to copy DreamWorks.
That's the Katzenberg way. We talked about that with Thief and the Cobbler. That's the thing with Ants and Bugs Life. Like,
yes. Even though those films aren't similar at all, Disney did not want to risk the confusion and then chose to delay the release for December.
Some people still get them confused sometimes anyway, so.
For the longest time, because I didn't pay attention to like companies making what, and I was pretty young, I thought Road to El Dorado was a Disney film. I didn't even realize that it came from DreamWorks. I just saw it as like, oh, kids animation, it's a feature movie, it's got to be Disney. Like somehow they honed in on that market.
I covered it for April Fool's last year on the podcast.
That's really funny. So the marketing for Emperor's New Groove seemed to be lacking, and it was because Disney assumed that it would not perform well in the box office. In fact, when it premiered, it was the fourth most popular movie that weekend.
Oof. I mean, what did it lose out to? Do we know?
The Grinch, What Women Want, Dude, Where's My Car?
Oh, man.
Wow. For Emperor's New Groove, it seemed like all the marketing budget, Disney was trying to like shift it over to another movie, which they knew was going to be a hit. And it was the Glenn Close classic. Micah, you know this movie, right?
102 Dalmatians.
Yes. That was released around Thanksgiving.
They also didn't think Lion King was going to do well. And that did much better than The Emperor's New Groove, obviously. But like Disney has a history of not having faith in things that end up having a following.
Well, Emperor's New Groove, it did manage to bring in $169 million in the box office, while 102 Dalmatians brought in just over $183 million.
So they were right on who to bank on.
Yes. The film was praised critically and audiences loved the film. And in fact, in 2001, the DVD was the best-selling DVD of the year.
Really?
And this is why I believed it was a straight-to-video movie.
Yeah.
Was because of its success in the DVD sales.
Yeah. You said it was like really critically praised. That honestly kind of surprises me because I would feel like critics at the time would be like, what is this? This is just weird and dumb and not very good.
My takeaway is Roger Ebert really loved Looney Tunes, and it reminded him of that.
Maybe at this point, this is where the Disney Renaissance was fading and people were probably excited to see Disney do something different.
That is exactly the reason that it was as successful as it was. And the reason I think they changed it in the first place, to be honest, was because Disney was getting in a rut of doing the same kind of movie.
A little bit like the success of Guardians of the Galaxy, where that just felt very different from other Marvel movies that were out.
Someone wrote an article about how Guardians of the Galaxy was the Emperor's New Groove of...
of the MCU?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Roger Ebert, his review for The Emperor's New Groove, he gave it 3 out of 4 stars. And we're talking about Looney Tunes. Like in here, he says, when the Looney Tunes trademark came on the screen at the kiddie matinee of long ago, the kiddies would cheer in unison because they were going to have unmitigated fun. The Emperor's New Groove evokes the same kind of spirit. He compares it to like Chuck Jones and Tex Avery.
2 different times, Disney has made a better Looney Tunes movie than Warner Brothers.
I think we're just going to continue talking about this shit forever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm so happy to get you on. Yeah, we're trying to get through as many of these as possible. I think this season.
I've never played the video game. The script of the video game is actually really good. Kronk's New Groove, it's fine. It's not as good as the original, but it doesn't need to be. It certainly has its cringy moments.
Behold, the fountain of youth in a bottle. Regular and diet.
The Emperor's New School is really interesting because for the first season, a lot of it was just them redoing jokes from the first movie. Then they sort of did it less as the series went on and focused more on, like, the characters. The TV show markets itself as Kuzco being the main character, but I like to think that everyone else is the main character, and Kuzco just thinks he's the main character.
Oh. Oh my god. Do they still have those? Can I? Yeah, it's going well.
Peasant for a day. Pronk becomes emperor for a day, and Kuzco becomes a peasant for a day, even though he's technically a peasant when he's not emperor already. So.
Pages worth of notes for the whole. Yeah.
There's an episode where Yzma clones Kuzco and the clone takes his place. I wonder if that had any influence from the original.
I mean, that's the only how to podcast. It all started with Weird Alphabet, and that's how I did it. Yeah. It was like, I talked about this in our discussion episode, but there's like always like 2 or 3 sources that I'm pulling from whenever I'm trying to like put it all together. So like when I put together the synopsis, I couldn't find a script because I don't think the actual script exists. Yeah. No. Yeah. As far as...
Didn't you say that 25% of the film had been finished before they scrapped it? That feels
storyboard
far too thin for it to be reasonable to get that finished.
The closest you're gonna get is a sequel that is inspired by...
Our previous episode we recorded was on Nimona, and that's a situation where, that film was 80% finished when it got scrapped and now is being picked up again by Netflix. But even then, it's not like they're just taking that original stuff and releasing it. Like they're having to remake a lot of it because animation takes a lot of work. You can't just say, oh, we've shot all the scenes. All we have to do is edit them and finish the effects like you can with a Justice League.
Okay. And then so I'm recording on my end, meeting as soon as he gets back here. Mine is we have like backups of like,
so we should get a graphic
recording.
novel
So like
version
everyone's
of Kingdom
recording
of the Sun.
individually. That's how.
But
I get
as
the cleanest,
long as we can like get an audio track just read by Owen Wilson just to go along with it.
all on one track, and then we have the information that's coming to help fill in any gaps or like any source of knowledge.
Empire of the Sun? I don't have any thoughts on that either.
I
I've never
may
seen
have
that movie,
missed because
Basically, my belief was this is one of the rare cases where the executives kind of had a point. The movie did not know what tone it wanted to go for, and that was why they brought on Mark Dindal to try to even it out more. And this is a problem you'll notice with lots of the Renaissance era Disney movies, because like Hunchback and Hercules had it in the opposite directions, where Hunchback was a serious movie, but then it would be really silly in these parts, especially with the gargoyles. And Hercules was a really silly movie, but then it would be really serious in these parts. The Emperor's New Groove, there's just enough seriousness for it to serve the story, but the tone is consistent the entire time.
Absolutely. I definitely see how early Renaissance films was trying to be both funny and serious. We're going to have the serious drama of the banished prince and the death of his father, but we're also going to have Timon and Pumbaa singing about eating bugs. And that definitely did not work in the favor of Hunchback and Hercules. My dog is named Quasimodo. Like, Hunchback of Notre Dame is great, but I absolutely think that those gargoyles have no place in that movie. It is kind of interesting how, like, the kind of end of the Disney Renaissance was when they were like, you know what? We're going to choose a tone and stick with it in a way that really works. You know, I think Atlantis really works in choosing a tone and sticking with it, and Lilo and Stitch and Emperor's New Groove. These are all movies that it was like, this is our tone, this is what we're going with, and it was the right call.
A lot of Disney movies try to push for innovative technology, and The Emperor's New Groove kind of went in the opposite direction, where there are scenes where there's CGI in the movie where they deliberately hide it, so you don't recognize that it's CGI.
yeah. So that's something that I definitely am going to ask you about, is like which ones do relate, because I think there's like two of almost mimic what the original one was going to. Huh. Why?
The movie works because it serves two purposes: to tell a story and to be funny. And I think it does both of those really well.
Now, the director, Mark Dindal, do you know what his next movie is going to be?
And then
in 2023, we're going to have Garfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
Chris Pratt is playing Andrew Garfield.
Yep. Chris Pratt,
David,
Jim Davis is
the days
writing
of the
it.
Weird Alphabet where Michael's computer would just be like, all right, and we're done recording. And
oh,
then
wait, no,
they
I'm sorry.
sing
Jim
with-
Davis isn't writing it. I read that totally wrong.
The writer is the writer of The Emperor's New Groove as well.
Oh, okay.
Mark Dindal's next movie after Emperor's New Groove, and the last movie until this next movie comes out, was Chicken Little, which had the opposite problem, where instead of the executives just giving up halfway through and telling the story artist to just do whatever, it was micromanaged the shit out of, to the point where it's not really Mark Dindal's story anymore.
Yep.
Mark Dindal's career just basically is a highlight of the pros and cons of executive meddling, basically.
What's your name? That's all you need. Just say your name, and then afterwards, if you want to go into that, then yes. Because if you say anything else, I've done this with multiple guests before. Just say your name. And that intro song is only so long. All right. Cool. Recording. All right. Hello, and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
From what I've seen from the documentary and everything, I think The Emperor's New Groove was the better direction to go.
Yeah.
To the podcast. Oh, Micah, this has been a movie that has been on our...
Well, Thank you, everybody, so much for listening, and thank you, Micah, for being on the podcast with us. This felt like it was years in the making. Micah, if people want to find more of what you've got going on, where can they find that?
I have a podcast that I mentioned already, The Emperor's New Podcast, which is available wherever podcasts can be found. I currently am writing an Emperor's New Groove fan comic, which I'm posting on the podcast Twitter. That's at podcastTENP on Twitter. You can also find my personal at Micah Hirsch on Twitter. And I have a YouTube channel where I release animated videos called Fireblast Studios.
Well, links for all that will be in the description. You can also find more information about this podcast at pipedreampodcast.com, where we have links to all of our social media pages as well as all of our other episodes. We are on Twitter at HDTNGM. We're on Instagram at How Did This Not Get Made? And you can send us your emails with suggestions, corrections, or things that we missed, notgetmade@gmail.com. And while you're at pipedreampodcast.com, you can find links to other podcasts such as Come On Fahugwa Pods, The Mystery Shack Look Back, and Escape from Walt Disney. And we also super appreciate anybody who leaves us a review on iTunes. That is such a wonderful way to make sure that podcasts get the recognition that they deserve and help more people find our show. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening.